it's Nikki here and welcome to a Bookish Friday video. So today's video is going to be my 2019 Bookish stats. Of course, the first thing that you're going to need to know to make all of these statistics make any kind of sense is how many books I read in 2019. So the grand total of books that I did end up reading was actually 180 books. 180 books. I'm astounded that I read that many. Those 180 books equate to approximately 60,716 pages. That's a lot of pages. And that averages out to a book length of 337 pages. So that does make sense to me because a lot of the books that I have read have been between like 350 to 400, and then there's been some that have been shorter and there have been some that have been longer. So yeah, that does make a lot of sense to me. Now my star ratings, because on Goodreads you are able to rate the books that you read between 1 and 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the least, or the worst. I rate my books by the way they make me feel. I'm not intelligent enough or educated enough to critically analyse any of the books that I read. I read for enjoyment, and so that's what I rate on. So let's start with those horrible 1-star reviews. I gave 3 books 1 stars. You'll hear about those later on. I gave 20 books 2 stars. I gave 89 books 3 stars. I gave 46 books 4 stars, and I gave 22 books 5 stars. So on average my star rating throughout the year has been a 3.4. so yeah, that makes sense to me. I've had a good reading year. I haven't been handing out those 4 and 5 stars willy-nilly, and I haven't had too many 1 and 2 star ratings. So, because when you read a bad book, it can put you in a slump. So, really glad with those ratings. Now, also on Goodreads, you can see your reading statistics for the year. So you can see how many books per month you've read, how many pages per month you've read, and things like that. So, the worst reading month for me, not including January of 2019, because I actually only started... Well, I only discovered Goodreads at the end of January. So my worst month for reading was February, obviously, because I was just getting into it. And I read 9 books in February. Now, for some people, 9 books is a lot, and I understand that. But for me, that was the month that I read the least books. My best reading month in the means of how many books that I read is actually shared by 3 months, and in each of these 3 months I read 21 books in each of these 3 months, which was April, May and October. I'm astounded, even for myself, because my average books for the month was about 15 or 16 books. So for 3 months I hit 21. That's got to be because I must have read some graphic novels or mangas in those months. So yeah, that's the only way I could have read 21 books in a month, because that is a stupid amount of books per month. Now, the month that I read the least pages in is obviously February. I read a total of 3,258 pages. Understandable, it was my the least books that I read, so obviously it was the least amount of pages. However, my best reading month in the amount of pages that I read is actually quite astonishing, because it's none of the 3 months that I read the most books. The month that I read the most pages in was actually August, where I only read 18 books, but I read a grand total of 7,691 pages. So obviously in August, I probably read a lot of bigger books, so books with more pages. And in the other 3 months where I read 21 books, I've obviously read a lot of mangas where they're quick, they're short, they're over and done with pretty quickly. So that was really interesting to see statistically. Now, looking at the genres that I have read, I do not break my genres down into the subcategories. Like with fantasy, you've got YA fantasy, adult fantasy, epic fantasy, dystopian fantasy, utopian fantasy. You've also got sci-fi blended in with fantasy as well. I know that there are a lot of subcategories within fantasy. However, to keep things simple, I don't subcategorize. I don't do that in my makeup inventory, and I'm not going to do it in my bookish inventory statistics either. So I'm aware that there are a lot of subcategories in these genres, and I've also included graphic novels and mangas in my genre list, and I know some people argue that they are not a genre. I get that. You do you. This is what I've done. So looking at the genres of what I've read, in fantasy I read 80 books, which makes sense. Contemporaries, I've read 21, which surprises me because I didn't think I'd read that many this year. In middle grade, so those are the children's books, I've read 26. I love a middle grade. I just love the simplicity of it, and you get some great stories in middle grades. Thrillers and mysteries, I read 20. For classics, I read 7, and I'm very proud of that number because before 2019, I didn't think I was intelligent enough to read and understand classics. However, in 2019, I fell in love with reading classics. I have found some amazing stories, my favourite one being Dracula. So, yes, I love it. And also Wind in the Willows. Boop, boop, off I go in it. Okay, so non-fiction. I read 3. I definitely want to up my non-fiction numbers for 2020 because I really want to educate myself a bit more with my reading. Graphic novels and mangas, I read 23. I do love them every now and again when I want to read, but I don't want to get too involved in a 350, 400 page book, but I want something quick and sharp. I'll pick up a graphic novel or manga. And poetry, I read 1. 1 was more than enough because I've come to realise that modern poetry should be heard, not read. Looking at the genders of the authors that I've read from, I read 57 books written by men. I read 103 books written by women, and I read 20 books that had both male and female authors. So I'm really happy with those numbers. I'm really happy that the female authors are becoming more normal and in fact actually are flooding the market now. Okay, so the source of the books that I read 100 books that I physically owned, and I read 80 books that I borrowed. So those are either physical books from my local library or books that I've read via like app subscriptions like Scribd, or my local library's app is called BorrowBox. It used to be Libby, but they changed it over to BorrowBox, so I've read through that as well, or I've borrowed it through Kindle Unlimited. So the way in which I consumed my books, the way I read the books, I read 153 physically, and then I read 27 books via audio. Out out of the physically read books, so that 153 number, 109 of those were paperbacks, 36 of those were hardbacks, and 8 were in ebook form. And that's really interesting because I never thought I'd be an ebook reader. Okay, so we've done all of the numbers. Let's look at some books, specific books that I read. So, the longest book that I read this year, or in 2019, this Behemoth. Yes, it's the biggest book I read. So this is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is a standalone story. However, Samantha Shannon has now mentioned that she is writing some kind of spin-offs from this, from some of the characters that are in this story. Maybe some of the sideline characters. Please, 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 hoping it's Loth. But yeah, I read this. I loved it. It's basically a story about the East and the West. One loves dragons and adores them, and then the other one fears them. And basically the East and the West are all heading towards this final epic battle. And yeah, it was such a wild ride. It hurt. Oh my God, it hurt to hold this reading it. My hands cramped so badly trying to hold this big, thick, heavy hardback, 848 pages worth of book. But my God, it was worth it. The shortest book that I read in 2019 was this little thing. So this is The Little Mermaid by Audrey Daly, I believe. Yeah, Audrey Daly. And it is tiny because it is one of those fairy tales by the Ladybird. And yeah, this is a children's story. I read this for nostalgia because this book was the first time as a child that I fell in love with mermaids. I did not fall in love with mermaids because of Disney. It was because of this book. The artwork in here, which I believe is done by Brian Price Thomas. The artwork in here is just beautiful. I mean, it's stunning. Read it and enjoyed all 32 pages of it. So yeah, that was the shortest book that I read. Now, the oldest published book I read was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This was one of the classics that I read. Of course it was going to be a classic, which was going to be the longest book, but which of my classics was the longest? And it happened to be this one. Wuthering Heights is obviously about Heathcliff and Catherine, and it's set on the bleak Yorkshire moors, and the whole tone of the writing of this just mirrored the Yorkshire moors so well. If you want to know what the Yorkshire moors are like, read this book. And this book was published originally back in 1847. Like, that is what? I've got to do maths now. 172 years ago. 172 years ago this was originally published. Blows my mind. Blows my mind. It's a classic. It's a beautiful story. No likable characters, but I think that's why I like it so much, because it's miserable and I loved it. So going from the oldest, let's talk about the youngest or the newest book that I read, and that was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Look at this cover, it's beautiful. So yeah, this was published in December 2019 and I read it. This wasn't on my December TBR, but when I got it home and I put it on my shelf, it kept calling to me. It was like, put down that book that you're reading and read me. You know you want to. And I was like, yes, I do want to. And so I actually put aside my December TBR and I picked this up because I couldn't wait to read this story. This is a whimsical, magical, weird story about a book within a book. And I love that. I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern earlier in the year. Okay, so the most popular book on Goodreads that I read, so the book that was read by most other people, was a book that I don't own. I got this one, actually I listened to it on audiobook via Libby, actually, before my library turned over to BorrowBox instead. And surprise, surprise, it is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. 6,409,120 other people have read this book and rated it on Goodreads. That's a lot of people. Now, I know a lot more people have probably read it, but they've not gone on to Goodreads to let everybody know. Look, I know these books are popular and they're everybody's like childhood phenomenon, history kind of. I missed it. Okay, I was busy being a single mum when all the films came out and the books just prior to that. I was too busy doing other things. I didn't read them as a kid. And so I started reading Harry Potter for the first time in 2019. I finished, the last book I finished was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So I think the next one I have to read is The Order of the Phoenix, I believe. I'm not impressed. These are not my favourite books. They're about a 3-star for me. They're okay. Let's move on. So the least popular book that I read on Goodreads, so the least amount of other people have read this book, was another library book, and you've probably never heard of it before because, only 2 other people have read it according to Goodreads. It's called The Impossible on the Run by Mark Illis. He is a local author in the Northeast, and his book was on an event that my local library was running for books that are from local authors. Read these. And so I did, and it was okay. It was about aliens. It was fun. It was cool. It was a children's book. I thought it was okay. I gave it about 3-star, I believe. So yeah, that was the least popular one. The highest rated book that I read on Goodreads, so the one that has the best star rating according to Goodreads, was Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. So this is actually a graphic novel. It's got some really cute like graphic style, like very cartoony like. This is about a gay romance. It was cute, it was adorable, it was okay, it was fine. This has an average star rating of 4.58 according to Goodreads at the time that I was taking the information. Obviously that might have changed in the time. I gave it a 3-star. And the lowest rated book according to Goodreads that I read was a non-fiction book. This is Talking with Psychopaths and Savages by Christopher Berry D. So that is this, and this is basically a journey into the evil mind, a chilling study of the most cold-blooded, manipulative people on planet Earth. So this is basically the psychology of serial killers and psychopaths and things like that. So you've got a case study of Harold Shipman, case study of John David Guy's Cannon, of Kenneth Alessio Bianchi. Some of the Americans might know those cases better than me. The psychopath Michael Bruce Ross. So it doesn't so much as delve into their particular crimes, but it delves into the psychology of their minds. So this one on Goodreads has an average star rating of 2.73. I rated it a 3 stars because I did find it quite interesting. However, I think the reason why this has such a low rating is because throughout the book, continuously, not just on the odd occasion, but continuously, the author is self-promoting his other books that he's written. Okay, so moving on to the prettiest book that I read was this one. Isn't she a stunner? She is gorgeous. This is The Surface Breaks, a reimagining of The Little Mermaid by Louise O'Neill. Look at the foiling. And it's on the back as well. And just the design of this is the mermaid, obviously, and you've got water coming up the sides, and then her hair is coming up and around. You've got foiling of fish and mirrors and knives and pearls and all. And then what makes this even more beautiful is you take off the dust jacket. Look at that! Scales on the dust jacket, foiled and everything, and it's just, she a beauty. She a beauty. She was a 1-star read. Oh my god, this book. You know me. You know me. I love The Little Mermaid. I love The Little Mermaid. I have mermaids everywhere in my room, but I hated this book with a vengeance. Louise O'Neill mentions in the afterword or something that she was commissioned to write this book, to write a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid. And so she did. Now I get it. Women should be equal to men. Women should get equal pay, equal chances within the workplace, equal opportunities in life. I'm all for feminism. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm all for feminism. What I'm not for is dragging men down to raise women up. I'm not for that. No. I'm not about calling men rapists and misogynists. And look, I get it. There are men out there who are not very nice people. Okay, I've met a few. But this book there's only one character here, and he's a very tiny character, very minimally mentioned in this book, who happens to be a nice guy. The rest of them, the Little Mermaid's father, the merman who is betrothed to the Little Mermaid, the prince, his friends, they're all nasty, vicious, sexist, misogynist, rapist. They're nasty, vicious creatures. And I was like, are you for real? Like, I kept rolling my eyes as I read this. I hated it so much. And the only reason why I still own this book is because it's so pretty. How can you be so gorgeous on the outside and so horrible on the inside? I am sorry to the author, but feminism should never ever be about tearing men down. It should be about raising women up. And I'm so sad. I mean, you might read this and think differently, but for me, I felt I was being hit around the head with a cricket bat saying men are bad, women are good, and I didn't like it. On the other scale of that, the most ugliest book that I read, and again, this is my opinion, but this book is fugly. I mean, it is, oh, it is fugly. And that is Seven Blades in Black. I mean, look at this book cover. I mean, and I'm not the only one to complain about this book cover. I've heard other people say that this book cover is the worst book cover they've ever seen. And I love the red, black and white. What I don't like is what is that? It's like somebody has taken a picture of somebody, then cut out their face, cut out their hands, and then stuck them on this front cover. It just, I mean, it's fugly. I mean, it really is. No, it should either be all photographic, like real life, or it should all be animated. Like, it's like, no. This is the most ugliest book I have ever seen in my life. But unlike The Surface Breaks, this is the funniest, brilliant book I read this year. I loved this book. When I got this book, I got it from the local library and I read it and I fell in love with it. I mean, the humour in this book. I love a good, sassy, funny, banter kind of characters, and this book is full of them. I love Sal the Cacophony. Her character is just so hilarious. And I knew that I wanted to own this book, so I went onto Amazon and I looked it up, and it said it wasn't released in the UK until 2020. And I was like, no, my local library has a copy. So how did they get a copy if it's not even released in the UK yet? So then I went and had a look on the USA Amazon, and there it was. It was available. So I ummed and ahed about it for a while, and then I couldn't wait. I knew I couldn't wait to own this book. I wanted to own it now, not later. So I ordered it from Amazon US because I needed this copy. I needed this book in my life because it is funny, hilarious, and I love it. But that front cover is fugly. I know that this is book 1 in the Grave of Empires series. It says so there on the spine. This book is by Sam Sykes, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned. So I know that there is another book coming. Please, please, book cover designers for the next book, please don't make it as fugly as this one. But also as well, it's a floppy. It's a floppy. So it kind of gets brownie points for that. I can forgive it for being so fugly because it's a floppy book and the story inside is funny as hell. Okay, so we are nearing the end. The last 2 books that I'm going to talk about. What was the worst book that I read in 2019? Some of you might be able to guess this, and some of you will probably laugh out loud when I hold this book up. It's got to be, hasn't it? I did a whole rant review about it earlier in 2019 when I read it for the 19 Books in 2019 challenge, hosted by the Wacky World of Lottie. The Templars, History and Myth by Michael Haag. Here it is in all its glory. I'm not going to go on about it, because if you want to know how I feel about this book, you can just watch that video. But I hated it. Yes, I did learn something about the Templars. I kind of want to pick up a different book about the Templars, and hopefully that one doesn't piss me off as much as this one did. It was more the tone of the author's voice rather than the information that I was getting, or the layout of the information, or you know, any of that. It was more the author's tone as he was writing this. It was very arrogant and I didn't like it, but I won't go off on one. So yeah, The Templars was my worst book of 2019. It got 1 star from me. So here we are, the final book I'm going to talk about, and we're going to end on a high because this was my favourite book of 2019. Now you might be thinking that it was a fantasy because I read 80 fantasy books, but you'd be wrong because it is actually, in fact, a contemporary. Yep, no one is more surprised than me because I've really gone off contemporaries in the last few months. But this one is phenomenal. I love this book. It is the exact opposite of OK by Laura Stephen. I mean, the artwork for one on that front cover is stunning. Very, very beautiful. And this is the funny story of Izzy O'Neill, who is an orphan. She lives with her grandma because her parents died when she was younger. They are living in poverty. Her grandma does work, but only earns enough to literally pay the bills and get through. And Izzy wants to be a comedy screenwriter. And she has a chance to enter a competition, but there is a fee for that, and so she's struggling to find the money for that. But what this actual story is about is slut shaming, because Izzy attends a party at the beginning of the book and she gets a little bit naughty, shall we say, with a local politician's son outside in the garden, and a few days later pictures appear on a blog post slut shaming her for her actions at that party. And the book then deals with how Izzy deals with the aftermath of those pictures being shown and people calling her all the names under the sun, but yet the boy who she had sex with is getting virtually nothing like what she's getting. Nothing at all, in fact. He's been made to be almost a victim in all of this. And she's the one taking the brunt of everyone's hatred and anger and, the youth of today and all of this kind of thing. And what I love the most about this story is that, yes, at the very beginning, you are laughing and chuckling along with Izzy and her sense of humour because she is really funny. It is written as a kind of like a diary, so you get like times and dates and stuff like that. So here, like Thursday the 29th of September. And it is written as a blog post, and then she is kind of inputting little tidbits into that as well with her sense of humour. But then about halfway through the story, when it really gets on top of her about all this slut shaming that she's having to cope with and deal with, and the consequences of this getting out and being public, you suddenly realise that you've stopped laughing and that actually you feel quite sad and depressed. And I thought it was a beautiful depiction of how depression can come on a person. In my past, I've had people say to me, well, when did you start feeling depressed? And it's like, I don't know. Because one day I was laughing and I was happy, and then another day I realised that I hadn't laughed for a while and I hadn't smiled in a while. But I don't know, there's no specific date or time that I went, oh yeah, I'm depressed now. It just came on slowly and surely until I suddenly realised, something's not right. And that was beautifully depicted in this story. You suddenly realised, I'm not laughing anymore. And I thought that was beautifully done. Within this story, the main character, also deals with unwanted affection from a close friend. So you know, he starts bringing her flowers when she's in class, and everyone's like, oh, that's so adorable and so wonderful and how cute. And she's like, but I don't want him to bring me flowers. I don't want his affection. I don't think of him like that. And then she's getting looked as if she's the bad person because she doesn't feel the same way about him. And there's the guilt of that as well, because I did meet Laura Stephen, and she said that she had a colleague at work who gave her unwanted attention, and she felt really guilty and really sort of hounded because she didn't reciprocate those feelings, and she felt like she was the one that was in the wrong. And what she wants young girls to understand is that just because somebody has feelings for you, that doesn't mean you have to have them back. And it is okay to say thanks, but no thanks. And I loved that. Laura Stephen is a feminist, and that's what I mean. Like, this is feminism done right, done perfectly. Even though the character who is given the unwanted attention, he's not a bad person. You can see that he is a good person. He's just making mistakes, and I really like that. I just love the whole tone of the book. I love the whole message of the book. I loved it so much that I bought the American hardback edition when that came out, again via Amazon US, good old Amazon US. And I also bought the sequel to this, which is A Girl Called Shameless. And then I also bought a copy of this for my daughter for Christmas so that she can read it as well, because I think it's very important that young ladies like her read books like this so that they understand, you know, the power that they have as young women. And a very important book, I think, for young girls to read, but a pleasant and happy and funny book as well. So yeah, this was my favourite book of 2019. I love it so much. And even better, it's signed and personalised. So yes, that is that. So those are all the statistics of the books that I read in 2019. I had a wonderful year, and I can't wait to see what 2020 brings for me. I have had some really good reads so far this January, so fingers crossed, not too many 1 or 2 star reads this year. And hopefully by the end of the year, when I have to start thinking about the worst book that I've read, hopefully I will struggle, because I don't want to read bad books. Who does? So that is it. That is my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.